I mean, Herbert was my novice master, so I actually lived with him for several years and next to him for a year and a half or 2 years. And I was very, very fond of him. I mean, he was one of the best, if not the best, English-speaking Thomistic scholar of the 20th century. Formidable mind. His training was as a scientist, as a chemist, if I remember, and his understanding of St. Thomas was that of a man with the mind of a steel trap. He was also a difficult man. I think that he was really quite shy, and he found personal conversation difficult. Good straight man, good straight male, found one-to-one conversation with other males difficult, and tended to be happier in groups, where he could, turn party pieces and things like that. He could be quite the soul of the party with under those circumstances. But because he was, a gruff old Yorkshireman, Yorkshireman was where he was born. He would, of course, have insisted on himself as being Irish, which is his ancestry, and he took Irish nationality as a protest against the British government's handling of Bloody Sunday. But because he was quite gruff, quite a lot of people were frightened of him and felt bullied by him, which I don't think that there was a bullying bone there. There is often the way that gruff people who are shy come across as bullies, but it's not the same thing. And I, for whatever reason, wasn't intimidated by him, maybe because I'd met more frightening people than he during my process of growing up. And we got on very, very well. So I have enormous affection and love for Herbert, and was terribly sad when he died, which was in his early 70s, and he should have lived longer. But his contribution to making the most vital and basic elements of Thomistic understanding of how we think available to a whole generation of people is superb. And one of the things that I'm really pleased by is that after his death, another Dominican, Brian Davis, who was a professor at Fordham, and who with whom I lived also in Oxford, and who was a great friend of Herbert's, found 6 books worth of unpublished talks and homilies of Herbert's, and so turned them into 6 posthumous books. He published more posthumously than he did during his life. And the number of people I've heard from in the United States for whom these books have been used by their professors and have been real openings up, just to understand basic things like Chalcedon, and a point which I've used constantly, which really I'm putting into Girardian language, something which Herbert taught me about the absolute non-rivalry of God with anything that is. And once you understand that, it sets you free from so many of the traps of people who assume that there must be some sort of tension between humanity, sinful humanity, and their wills and God. He said, no, once God is not in rival with anything that is. Sinful humanity's problem is sinful humanity's problem. God is desperately keen to try and get us out of it. It's not a psychodrama. It's not an inner psychodrama between God and humans. It's an inner psychodrama with humans, with God desperately trying to get us out of it. And once you see that, you begin to just have a far, far richer sense and a far more peaceful sense of the presence of God in the world, behind everything, in everything, the gracious way in which we are moved from within without being displaced. These are extraordinary insights which, once understood, just make basic Christian faith so much lighter, not only in terms of yoke to bear, but in terms of illumination. So no, I owe an enormous amount to Herbert, and I'm very, very fond of him.